Hailey woke up at 2:23 a.m., not for any reason she could name. Jack's monitor was green. The house was quiet. Nothing had triggered the waking. Her body had simply surfaced from sleep on its own, the way bodies do sometimes in the middle of the night without explanation or warning. She lay in the dark for a moment, listening. Justin was beside her. She could hear his breathing, slow, deep, the rhythm of someone completely under. She got up. Not because anything required it. The specific middle-of-the-night pull of a parent toward a child's room, even when the monitor says green and the house says quiet and nothing is wrong. Just to check, just to see. She went down the hall. She put her hand on Jack's door. She pushed it open slowly. The specific care of someone entering a room where people are sleeping. The hinges were quiet. She had learned which speed produced noise and which did not. The room was dark. The nightlight cast its low orange glow. The crib was in the center of the room where it always was. She stepped inside. She stopped. Justin was on the floor, not on a chair, not leaning against the wall in a half-awake way. Fully on the floor. On his side, knees drawn up slightly, head on his arm. The specific position of someone who stopped fighting the sleep a long time ago and went fully under. He had been there long enough that his breathing was deep and even. This was not recent. He had not just arrived. He was between the crib and the wall, not against the opposite wall, next to the crib. Close enough that if Jack had stretched his arm through the bars, he could have touched him. Hailey stood in the doorway. She looked at her husband asleep on the floor of their son's room at 2:23 in the morning. Jack was asleep in the crib above him. Justin was asleep on the floor below. The two of them in the same room, the same dark, the same orange nightlight glow, both completely under. She stood there for a long time. She did not go to him. She did not crouch down beside him or put her hand on his shoulder or whisper his name. She stood in the doorway in the dark and she looked at the two of them, her husband and her son, and she held what she was seeing. Then she went back down the hall. She got into bed. She lay in the dark. She did not sleep for a while. She never told him she had seen it. Not that night. Not the next morning when he came back to bed at 5 a.m. and lay down beside her, and she kept her eyes closed and her breathing even so he would think she was still asleep. Not at breakfast. Not across the following days. She held it. Not as a secret that required keeping. As a thing that belonged to him. To the specific version of him that had walked down the hall at 2 a.m. because a dream had been too real. That version did not know it was being seen. It had not performed anything. It had just done what it needed to do, and she had stood in the doorway and watched it and then gone back to bed and lay in the dark thinking about what she had seen. She thought, he had a dream about losing Jack and he went to be near him. Not to the kitchen for a drink. Not to sit with the fear in the dark. To be physically near Jack. To put himself in the same room. She thought, he could have woken me. He did not wake me. He went alone. Not because he didn't want me there, because this was his to handle, and he handled it. She thought his hand was near the bars, even asleep, facing toward Jack, hand near the bars. She lay there for a long time with those three things, and then she let herself fall back asleep. At 5 a.m. she felt him come back to bed. She kept her eyes closed. She listened to him settle, to his breathing slow from the specific wakeful rhythm to the sleep rhythm. She thought, he's back. He went to be near Jack and now he's back. She thought, someday he'll tell me. She did not find out why he was there until 3 weeks later. Not because she asked, because he told her, the same way he had been telling her things lately. He had been in a period of giving her the pieces, the Selena thing, the night before the wedding, the 3 a.m. on the yacht, each one in the right order, each one at the right time. The floor of Jack's room was one of the pieces. She had known it would come. She had felt it sitting in him the way she feels things that are waiting to be said. The specific quality of someone who is carrying something they have not yet found the moment for. She had waited. She had not asked. She had trusted the same thing she always trusts, that if he has something to say, he will say it when he is ready. He was ready on a Thursday evening. They were in the kitchen after dinner. Jack was in bed. The kitchen was the specific quiet of an evening that has finished its activity and is settling. Justin was at the table and he was not looking at anything. The unfocused look of someone who is about to say something. She sat down across from him before he said it. He said, I need to tell you something. She said, okay. He said, there was a night, a few weeks ago. I got up in the middle of the night, I don't know what time. And I went to Jack's room and I sat on the floor next to his crib and I stayed there until I fell asleep. Hailey looked at him. He said, I woke up on the floor at 5 a.m. I came back to bed before you woke up. You were asleep. I didn't tell you. She said, why did you go? Subscribe to Justin Bieber Archives right now. We upload every day. The reason Justin was on that floor is coming. He said, I had a dream. She said, about what? He said, about losing him. Not a nightmare with a scene or a cause or something specific happening. Just a dream where I was in the house and he was not there. Not gone anywhere. Just not there. Not anywhere. And I knew in the dream that he was never going to be in the house again, and I could not find a reason and there was no explanation. Just the house without him in it. She was very still. He said, I woke up and I knew immediately it was a dream. I knew, but I could still feel it, the specific weight of it, the way those dreams sit in your chest even after you know they're not real. The house without him feeling. Still there, even knowing it was a dream. She said, so you went to his room? He said, I needed to see him, not the monitor. The monitor tells you green and you know he's there but you can't. I needed to see him, with my eyes, in the room. Physically present and breathing and real. She said, and then you stayed. He said, I sat on the floor next to the crib and I watched him sleep, and the dream started to fade. The house without him feeling started to go. And at some point I didn't want to leave because leaving felt like giving the dream permission to come back, so I stayed. She said, and fell asleep. He said, and fell asleep on the floor. He looked at the table. He said, I woke up at 5 a.m. My back hurt. I was on the floor and my back hurt and I didn't know how long I'd been there. I came back to bed. You were asleep or you looked asleep. I lay down and I didn't say anything. He said, I almost woke you. I thought about it. But it was 5 a.m. and you were asleep, and what was I going to say? I fell asleep on the floor next to Jack because I had a dream? It felt like too much for 5 a.m. She said, so you didn't tell me. He said, so I didn't tell you. Hailey looked at him for a moment. He said, I know it's... She said, don't. He said, don't what? She said, don't qualify it. Don't say I know it's whatever. It's not whatever. He looked at her. She said, I saw you. He said, what? She said, that night. I woke up around 2 a.m. and you were gone and I went to check on Jack and you were on the floor. He stared at her. She said, asleep, on your side, next to the crib. I stood in the doorway for a while. He said, you didn't wake me. She said, no. He said, you went back to bed. She said, yes. He said, why didn't you tell me? She said, because it was yours. The same reason I went back down the stairs on the yacht. What you were doing in that room at 2 a.m. didn't need me to say anything about it. It needed me to let it be what it was. He said, what was it? She said, a father who had a bad dream about losing his son and went to be near him. He said nothing. She said, that's what I saw. That's what I took back to bed with me. Comment now. Did Hailey make the right call by not waking him? Or should she have said something? He said, 3 weeks. She said, yes. He said, you've been carrying that for 3 weeks. She said, I carry things, you know that. He said, and you weren't going to tell me. She said, I was going to tell you when you told me. I knew you would. You've been telling me everything lately. I knew this one would come eventually, and it was better for it to come from you. Your version, not mine. He said, my version. She said, the reason. I could see what you were doing, but I didn't know why. Now I know both parts. He said, does it? She said, does it what? He said, change anything. The way you see me. She said, yes. He said, how? She said, I already loved you before Thursday. I loved you after the Selena thing and after the yacht and after the almost didn't marry you. I already had the full picture of the last few months. Now I love you in a way that has this image in it too. You on the floor in the dark next to his crib. That's in me now. It's part of how I see you. He said, I was just scared. I had a dream and I went to be near him. That doesn't sound like something to love. She said, you went toward the thing you were afraid of losing. You didn't lie in bed trying to think the fear away. You didn't call someone. You didn't wake me. You went to the floor next to his crib and you let him being there make the fear smaller. That is exactly what you're supposed to do with that kind of fear. He said, I didn't think of it that way. She said, I know, but that's what it was. He said, it's the most lovable thing I've ever seen. She looked at him. She said, you're quoting me back to me. He said, it was a good line. She said, it was true. He said, yeah. She said, your hand was near the bars, Justin. Even asleep, even when you didn't know what your body was doing, you were still reaching toward him. He looked at the table. He said, I didn't know that. She said, I know. That's the part that stays with me. She told him the rest of what she had seen that night. Not just him on the floor. The specific details she had been carrying for 3 weeks. The details that had stayed with her in the way specific images stay, vivid, unchanged, exactly as they were when she saw them. The way his knees were drawn up slightly. The way his head was resting on his arm. The way his body was facing the crib. Not away from it, not at an angle, directly toward it. Even completely asleep, even without knowing what his body was doing, facing toward Jack. She said, your hand was near the bars. He said, what? She said, your right hand. It was near the crib bars, not through them, just near them. Like even asleep you wanted to be close. He was quiet for a moment. He said, I didn't know that. She said, I know, you were asleep. He said, I was asleep and my hand was near the bars. She said, yes. He said, I don't know what that is. She said, I do. That's what it looks like when someone loves another person in the most complete way possible. When the love is so present that it shows up even when you're not conscious. He looked at her. She said, that's what I took back to bed with me, your hand near the bars. He said, Hailey. She said, I know. He said, I almost didn't tell you. She said, I know, but you did. He said, because I've been telling you everything. She said, because you've been becoming someone who tells the truth, and this is part of that. Jack slept through all of it. He had slept through the night in question, through Justin sitting on the floor beside him, through Justin falling asleep, through Justin waking at 5 a.m. and walking back down the hall. He had slept through all of that without stirring, without knowing any of it was happening, and now he was sleeping through this Thursday evening conversation in the kitchen. The specific deep sleep of a young child who does not yet know what his parents talk about after he goes to bed. He was too young to know any of it. He was too young to know any of it, but someday he would be old enough to hear it. And when Justin told him, not now, not soon, but someday when Jack was old enough to understand what it means to love someone that much, Jack would know that his father had once been so afraid of losing him that he had slept on the floor to be near him, and that his mother had stood in the doorway at 2:23 a.m. and watched it happen and gone back to bed and carried it for 3 weeks and said nothing until the right moment. That is the marriage. That is the family. A father on the floor at 2 a.m. because a dream had been too real and his son's presence was the only thing that could make it less real. A mother in the doorway who stood there long enough to see the whole shape of it, and then went back to bed and carried it for 3 weeks. A child asleep in his crib between them. Completely unaware. Completely loved. Not aware that his father had once slept on the floor beside him to stay close. Not aware that his mother had stood in the doorway at 2:23 a.m. and held what she saw for 3 weeks without saying anything. Not aware that she had told Benny about it in the meantime. Not aware of the Thursday kitchen conversation. Not aware of any of it, but growing up surrounded by it. Surrounded by a father who goes to the floor when the fear is loud, and a mother who stands in the doorway and understands what she is seeing, and 2 people who tell each other the truth, one piece at a time, at the right moment. That is the house Jack is growing up in. He does not know it yet, but someday he will. There is one more thing. Hailey told Benny about it. Not Justin. Justin didn't know she had seen it until he told her on the Thursday. But in the 3 weeks between that night and that Thursday, she had told Benny, not as a story, as a thing she needed to say out loud to someone who would understand what it meant without requiring explanation. She said, I found Justin asleep on the floor next to Jack's crib at 2 a.m. Benny said, what? She said, he was just there, asleep, on the floor. I went to check on Jack and there he was. Benny said, did you wake him? She said, no. He said, why not? She said, because whatever put him there was his. I didn't want to interrupt it. Benny was quiet for a moment. He said, did you ask him about it? She said, no. I'm waiting for him to tell me. Benny said, and you think he will? She said, I know he will. He's been telling me everything lately. This one will come, Benny said. And in the meantime, you're just carrying the image. She said, yes. He said, what does it look like? She said, him on his side, facing the crib, his hand near the bars. Benny was quiet again. Then he said, that's a person who loves his kid. She said, yes. He said, really loves his kid. She said, yes. Benny said nothing else. He didn't need to. She said, I just needed to say it out loud. He said, I know. She said, to someone who would understand. He said, I understand. What do you think Hailey felt standing in that doorway at 2:23 a.m.? Leave your theory in the comments. I will pin the most compelling one.